Arb wer world when feskadus adawamla amen. Besma arb wer world when feskadus adawamla amen. Besma arb wer world when feskadus adawamla amen. Good morning, blessings and love. So today's chapter is quite long, so I'm going to get straight into it. Give thanks. Leviticus 4. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if anyone sins unintentionally in any of the things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done, and does any of them, if the anointed priest sins so as to bring guilt on the people, then let him offer to his sin which he has sinned a young bull without defect to Yahweh for a sin offering. He shall bring the bull to the door of the tent of the meeting before Yahweh. He shall lay his hand on the head of the bull and kill the bull before Yahweh. The anointed priest shall take some of the blood of the bull and bring it to the tent of the meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before Yahweh, before the veil of the sanctuary. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before Yahweh, which is in the tent of the meeting. And he shall pour out the rest of the blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tent of the meeting. He shall take all the fat of the bull of the sin offering from it, the fat that covers the innards, and all the fat that is on the innards, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them, which is by the loins, and the cover on the liver with the kidneys he shall remove, as it is removed from the bull of the sacrifice of peace offerings. The priest shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering. He shall carry the bull's skin, all its meat, with its head and with its legs, its innards and its dung, and the rest of the bull outside of the camp to a clean place, where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on the wood with fire. It shall be burned where the ashes are poured out. If the whole congregation of Israel sins, and the thing is hidden from the eyes of the assembly, and they have done any of the things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done, and are guilty, when the sin in which they have sinned is known, then the assembly shall offer a young bull for a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of the meeting. The elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before Yahweh, and the bull shall be killed before Yahweh. The anointed priest shall bring some of the blood of the bull of the tent of the meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before Yahweh, before the veil. He shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar which is before Yahweh, that is in the tent of the meeting, and the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the door of the tent of the meeting. All its fat he shall take from it, and burn it on the altar. He shall do this with the bull, as he did with the bull of the sin offering. So he shall do with this, and the priest shall make atonement for them, and they shall be forgiven. He shall carry the bull outside of the camp, and burn it as he burnt the first bull. It is the sin offering of the assembly. When a ruler sins, and unwittingly does any of the things which Yahweh his God has commanded not to be done, and is guilty, if his sin in which he has sinned is made known to him, he shall bring as an offering a goat, a male without defect. He shall lay his hand on his head and of the goat and kill it in the place where they kill burnt offerings before Yahweh. It is a sin offering. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of the burnt offering. He shall pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar of the burnt offering. All its fat he shall burn on the altar, just like the fat of the sacrifices of the peace offerings. And the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, and which he will be forgiven. If anyone of the common people sins unwittingly in doing any of these things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done, and and is guilty, if his sin which he has sinned is made known to him, then he shall bring for his offering a goat, a female without defect, for his sin which he has sinned. He shall lay his hands on his head of the sin offering, and kill the sin offering in the place of the burnt offering. The priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of the burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. All its fat he shall take away, like the fat is taken away from the sacrifices of the peace offering. And the priest shall burn it on the altar for a pleasant aroma to Yahweh. And the priest shall make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. If he brings a lamb as his offering for a sin offering, he shall bring a female without defect. He shall lay his hands on the head of the offering and kill it, for a sin offering is in the place where the kill of the burnt offering. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of the burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. He shall remove its fat like the fat of the lamb which is removed from the sacrifice for peace offerings. The priest shall burn them on the altar, and on the offering of Yahweh made by fire. The priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin which he has sinned, and he will be forgiven. Give thanks for these 3 words. Blessed love. Excuse me, I guess get a sip of vitamin C. So what we have here is the sin offerings for the unintentional sin contravening. So they're not the intentional ones. They are, if you unintentionally sin and it's made known to you, then if you're a priest, a leader, a member of the community, or an individual or the community itself, then there's different, there's a bull, there's a lamb, there's a goat, there's different offerings that you will then bring to the altar to atone for your sin. So I'm pleased that we're seeing here sacrifices, not human sacrifices. In some of the previous chapters in Genesis and in Exodus, we've seen people being killed for sinning and losing their lives. This is unintentional, so I'm sure in the following chapters we're going to see what happens with intentional sin. And I don't know I don't know the spoilers. There may be some of that might be committed to death if you intentionally sin. So we'll deal with those chapters when we come to it. Sin is one of these areas in religion. This, can be quite controversial or deeply controversial, because sin is one of these kind of, I guess, internal structures of how we self-regulate within a community, within a society. If someone sees you doing something wrong and there's laws against it, if someone still sees you stealing something and then you're arrested and you're put to task, and that's much more clear-cut. Where the idea of sin, particularly on an internal sense, if you're by yourself, there's no one else around you and witness, but you know what you've done is a sin, then it's about self-policing, self-regulating, and actually doing right in the eyes of God, even when there's no other eyes on you. And then you yourself have known that you've done wrong, and then want to atone for your sin and pray for forgiveness, etc. So it's a self-policing, regulatory thing. Obviously, sin exists whether there's eyes on you or not. But when it comes to much more internal, psychological kind of policing, that's when, that's when it can become, I guess, challenging for people, because as humans, no one is perfect. We all sin every day, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, maliciously, or could you say the word innocently, whether that's with our eyes, with our ears, with our thoughts. Sometimes spontaneous thoughts come to our head. We might see something and see a certain thing, and actually having control over those immediate impulses, I guess, is what the process is all about, through prayer, through meditation, to have control over your mind, have control over your thoughts. But I think where it gets then challenging is because as humans, we're not perfect, and we never will attain to be perfect. And I think it's hugely problematic when we think we're perfect. That's oftentimes, I think, when religion can tip into something else, which is maybe closer to kind of fascism or something, when it's, expecting everyone to exist on this holy plane as if everyone is kind of spotless. It's like, well, no, the starting point is we are imperfect. Everybody sins, and working from that basis rather than working from the basis of human perfection and nobody sins. Because that's when, we have seen religions commit atrocities, human rights atrocities, etc. Because it's trying to assume a holy level of normality rather than a human level of normality. So I think it's extremely difficult, particularly when states get involved in religion. Many countries have a separation between religion and state. But I think when state and religion become so connected that the laws of the land are also the religious laws, we've seen that working. I mean, Ethiopia itself, and Haile Selassie being a defender of the faith, etc., etc. But it wasn't done in a way that that we're seeing now, like, for example, with the Taliban in Afghanistan, which is a completely different thing. So even within Ethiopia, even though the religion and the state was connected, there was still a difference between the religion and the state. Whereas in places like Afghanistan, there's no separation between religion and state. And I think that's where it causes huge problems. So, we see that in other kind of totalitarian religious states around the world. So, yeah, I think these laws are really interesting. And I like the fact that, there is this separation between unintentional sin and intentional sin, etc. Again, I'm under no illusions we're in the middle of the Old Testament, and the Old Testament, is quite harsh, known to be quite harsh than the New Testament. So let's wait and see what happens in the following chapters with the intentional sin. What are the wages going to be for intentional sin? But self-regulation isn't a bad thing. Because obviously, living in a community and society, we want to do right by our neighbours, So even Jesus's mantra of treat others as you would have them treat yourself, love your neighbour as you love yourself, that is us self-regulating to be kind and good to other people. And so it's no bad thing to be self-regulatory. It's just the balance when it comes to the state imposing some of those levels of expectation. I'll leave it there. Huge topic, but I will leave it there. Have a blessed day, and glory to God. Give thanks.